Hey there. Today I'll be talking about one of the most controversial elements of the first two Fast and Furious movies. What am I talking about? Well, of course, I'm talking about the sounds of the cars. And specifically, I'm talking about the soundtrack and specifically the engine and special effect sounds. So let's get into it. Honestly, some of the engine sounds were 100% accurate. Some were not even close. As an example, we all remember when Dominic Toretto showed up in his RX-7. Even back in 2001, audience watching that scene realized that was not the sound of an RX-7. Certainly didn't sound like a turbocharged rotary engine at all. Brian's Eclipse didn't sound anything like the 4G63 as the car was portrayed, but it actually had a 428, and I can go on and on and on. So what happened? Let me explain. When movies are made, certain tasks, of course, are handed to different teams in different departments. The wardrobe department handles costumes. The prop department handles props. The picture car team is responsible for building and maintaining the cars. And so the task of providing the sound effects of the cars was assigned to the sound design team. The operative word in that phrase is design. It's not just a recording, it's just creating the sound, goes way beyond just sticking a microphone in somebody and have them talk. That's not what it's going on. Whether it's stepping on a potato chip or crashing through a window, all of this is done by the sound design team, and it's a big job. I got a little glimpse of it, and I was fascinated. Of course, there are some elements that are simply recorders, such as the dialogue, of course, but everything else is manufactured. However, when the movie is about fast cars and street racing, it becomes much more complex. So the sound design team comes up with the plan and they create a previs, which basically is an animated storyboard. Then they share their ideas with the director, and from that moment on, the sound design team always works close with the director. They start providing a feeling or mood that encompasses the music, the dialogue, even the environmental elements, such as wind and rain, footsteps, doors opening, all that kind of stuff. And if you go back and watch the very first race in the first movie, just pay attention to all the individual sounds. The engine getting louder and louder, each gear change, the slamming of the clutch pedal during each shift, and the wind rushing by. The engine sounds from the inside the car and from behind the car. All those things are happening at the same time. All that stuff is mixed together. I didn't really understand how complicated it was going to be until I received the phone call from Universal. When they called me, they basically said to me, and you have to remember this was months after we had completed filming. The whole movie had been filmed, they were done with that, and they're in editing. During this call though, they asked me if I could help to facilitate a recording session of the cars, and then they outlined the process, basically what was needed, logistically, and more importantly, could we get the cars and get them to come out to a place where we can do the recording, and how to be in a silent place. Where could you drive where there's no other sounds? That was a big one. The sound team for this movie was a company called Soundstorm. As sound professionals, it's their job to bring to the mix all the elements that are needed. It takes many people to get all of these sounds recorded and edited and fine-tuned after that. Once all of the recordings have been recorded, those tracks are passed along to a great mixer. And the mixer's job is to put it all together, sort through the dialogue, the music, and all the sound effects, and find the perfect balance from moment to moment. The ultimate authority in the end is the director. The process of producing sound effects is an art, and these people take their jobs very seriously. I quickly learned that sound design professionals are artists, and just like actors and actresses, and I was fascinated by their work. The supervising sound editor was a guy by the name Bruce Stambler. I met him personally at the location. Really nice guy. He spent some time with me and explained a little bit of the process. Basically, the audio tracks are separated individually. Then they might add in sweeteners. Sweeteners are some other audio track to kind of pump up the depth or the dimension. By a remarkable coincidence, by that time I was exploring a program called Final Cut Pro, and I knew about editing in a nonlinear editor software like Final Cut Pro, Premiere Pro. So I knew about editing multiple tracks because I had a little bit of experience. But looking at their panels, it was just blew me away. Bruce's idea was to gather as many of the actual cars and just mount microphones on the cars. Inside the car's cabin, microphones were also placed under the hood to capture those great noises, blow-off valves, wastegates, and the turbocharger, supercharger, or whatever was going on under the hood, right? So that was a good plan, and put in a microphone next to the exhaust and another one out in the trunk of the car so you can hear everything. Of course, microphones were placed externally next to the runway to catch the flybys as the cars were flying by. Actually, we were hauling ass. Some of us were doing 120 plus. These pictures were taken on a very cold day in October of 2000. You can see how and where they placed the microphones. Sitting in my car is a guy with 2 DAT machines. He's capturing all the feeds from the microphone so he can kind of put it all together, right? But the bad part about that, if you're looking down at your monitors, these DAT machines, and you're not looking out, it's very easy to get car sick, and that's exactly what happened. We had to pull over, and he barfed. I felt really bad for the guy, but he was solely committed to the task. In my car, they placed a mic next to my blow-off valve, one in the rear hatch and one next to the muffler. We found this great quiet location away from the roads or other civilization at a place called Agua Dulce Airport. It's about 45 miles north of Los Angeles and about 100 miles from my house in South Orange County. So we all went up there. The small airport is a perfect place to do this because you can't hear anything. There's no sound. You don't hear cars, you don't hear gunshots. Perfect place. With Soundstorm ready to tackle the challenge, I immediately started calling around to owners of the Hero cars. By this time though, some of the Hero cars had already been sold. At least one had been destroyed in an accident. What do we do now? A few of the other cars weren't suitable, and what I mean is, let me use Jesse's Jetta as an example. That car in real life had a naturally aspirated 2-liter engine with an automatic transmission and a little air filter, and that was the whole thing. There was nothing else. There was just nothing masculine or impressive about the exhaust note of that car. So we had to just axe it and find another car. So some other car would have to donate its soundtrack to give some oomph to the Jesse's Jetta. We had a similar problem with Brian's Eclipse. The Hero car actually had a 428 non-turbo engine. The engine sounds were considered to be not spicy enough to impress audiences, and that's an understatement. Because of this, we had to find another car. Now, Brian's Eclipse ultimately used the soundtrack of a naturally aspirated Honda product. I'm not sure if it was one of the Honda Civics that we had or the Integra that we had. However, years later, I heard that they also recorded a supercharged CRX. The car was reportedly provided by a famous street racer called Greg Leone, but I can't confirm that personally because I was not there on that day. But it sure sounded like his car. However, I can confirm that NYRA racer Miles Bautista was there with 2 of his race cars, an Integra and a Civic, both sporting B16 turbocharged motors. These pictures were taken at Agua Dulce on that day back in 2000. Unfortunately though, one engine was blown due to the fact that the car was running hard on pump gas at altitude. And if you're a racer, you know the challenges about that. And as I said about the RX-7, since the Hero car was not available, they used a 2JZ with a lot of editing to spice it up. They included some sweeteners, diesel machinery, bears, tiger roars, rocket engines, earthquakes, and a myriad of other things. Sound design. And they designed it to put together, it's like a house. Letty's 240 also used a 2JZ super soundtrack with some minor tweaks. My supercharged Maxima was recorded on that same day, and it was used almost with no modification in the mixing studio. Same with the soundtrack of the Supra. It was pretty spot on. I know because I spent a lot of miles on that car. Mia's Integra used a recording from a modified, naturally aspirated Honda Civic. That was the go-to sound file. Same for the Jesse's Jetta, like I said before, and also for Johnny Tran's S2000. The Dodge Charger was not recorded at that runway. They found a Dodge Hemi drag race car, and they went to the strip and captured the sounds there. And of course, as you can imagine, Danny Yamato's Civic and Edwin's Integra both used soundtracks pulled from the modified Hondas from Miles Batista's cars. Some cars had such a small role they didn't even bother to record them. Vehicles like the Ford Lightning, well, the Ford Lightning pickup truck did come to the sound recording. They didn't do any sound files. I couldn't find anything. So in layman's terms, while they recorded a lot of the cars, they spiced up many of the raw recordings. What went into these recordings is a proprietary recipe, as I mentioned a couple of times in the video. What was impressive to me was that when I first saw the movie in an actual movie theater, like with everybody else, the engine sounds pretty good. I mean, you could tell some of them are off, but you know, Dom's RX-7's soundtrack was disappointing to me when I first heard it in the rough cut, and it was still rough when we got it at the end, when we saw the final cut. Director Rob Cohen reminded me that most people wouldn't know the difference. Mostly true, Rob, but later on, not so much. And let's be honest, back then, most people didn't know much about tuner cars, especially in Middle America or other countries. If you want to have some fun, go to the Sound Dogs website and use the search bar for the library of sound clips of cars. Just type in supercharged Maxima, turbo Supra, turbocharged Integra, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'll have a lot of fun. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm moving close to 250,000 subs. I'd really appreciate your support. And as always, feel free to leave me a comment below asking me to do a video about other car topics. I want to move away from Fast and Furious stuff once I'm all done with this round. So thanks for watching. See you next week.